Thanks for staying with us, and we're having a fantastic conversation with Sonia Choquette. Sonia, before the break, we're talking about the tipping point.
Right.
Yep. Now, what I'd love to, before moving back onto that, is talk a little bit about your personal journey, because you've written how many books now?
14.
14. Okay. What number was this one, Diary of a Psychic?
That was number 7.
Okay.
But it should have been the first.
Interesting, isn't it, that it wasn't?
Well, actually, I had always intended it to be the first, but I put out some other books first and then came around to that, and I think it made sense to me later, but it's the one I think people should start with first.
Yeah. Well, saying to you earlier, would love it if every kid around 11, 12 read this.
I think so.
It's such an easy read, honestly, and if you're fascinated with what we're talking about here, I absolutely recommend getting it. It's one of the easiest read books that I've read. Just talking a little bit about this, one of the things that came out was your mum.
Well,
And how she...
right. You know, people ask me, and have all the time, how did you become so comfortably as connected to your intuition? And I really believe that the gift I had was not that I was endowed with anything unique or particular, but I was raised in an environment that was set by my mother, where intuition was considered absolutely the most important sense. And the reason for that is that when she was a child, she was caught up in the war, World War II. As a 12-year-old, she separated from her family in an evacuation. She lost touch with her family, and she ended up being put in a prison of war camp. She was marched across Hungary for 11 days and 11 nights with all these other prisoners, and they were not allowed to speak, and they were not allowed to in any way communicate. And she said the fear was palpable. Everyone was just terrified, and when she looked around, the only thing she saw coming back at her was, it's over, you're going to die. And something inside of her rebelled. And she said, it was my spirit. And my spirit said, just listen to me, just follow me, you'll be okay. And she said, I had a choice. I could go with what appeared, but it promised death or not. So she said, maybe it was just survival on a colossal level. But I decided to go with my spirit.
At 12 years old?
At 12 years old. She said, that's all I had.
Yeah.
So that feisty spirit of hers.
That's what handed down.
When she was in the prison of war camp, they decided to ship her off to Odessa. And her spirit said no. And as the train was picking up momentum, she noticed all of a sudden as she looked around that in one split second, no one was watching her, and she happened to be in front of a door, and she jumped off the train.
Really?
She decided, if I'm going to go, I'll go on my own terms.
Yeah.
Well, she survived.
Wow.
And she hid in a barn. She eventually got turned back in, but by then things had settled. She'd worked for a short period of time for a cook in one of the Nazi quarters, and she said, you know, it wasn't a bad life considering my alternatives. So she used her vibes, and when the cook would leave, she would pay attention to the energy, and she'd snitch food. She said, at first it was a piece of bread and cheese, and then, you know, I got really good when I'd go for the chocolate. Well, she ended up being liberated at 15, and she saw, they all lived. She said all of us, the Germans, the prisoners, we were all in the same playing field because there was nothing. And we had to use our vibes to survive. So she used hers to gather wood in the forest, and she would sell it to the Gasthaus, the restaurant, and they would give her food. Well, one day her spirit, when she was coming home, said that the American soldier in town was going to be her boyfriend. And she shared that information with her fellow prisoner of war, liberated prisoners of war, and they laughed at her. And they said, look at you, you sleep in a barn, you smell like a horse, you wear mixed army shoes. And she said it was the first time someone had challenged her. And she said it angered her and said, you mark my words. Well, a few weeks later, she was coming back from the forest. It had just rained, and she was bringing the wood back, and sure enough, there was that soldier. He's coming down the road in a Jeep, and he drove right in front of her and splattered her with mud and kept on going, and oh, she was furious. So she picked up a stick of wood and ran after him and yelled, "Who do you think you are?" Well, fast forward, that man is my father.
And the father of your 6 brothers and
my
sisters.
father,
yeah.
and they have been married to this day 62 years. So obviously her vibes worked out.
Absolutely.
You know, she suffered a lot. She even lost her hearing during the war. So I grew up with a mother who was not able to hear. She had only been educated till she was 14, and that was in the prison and war camp. And yet she was extremely gifted, and she gave us a message when we were little. No matter what appears and no matter how bad it looks, you have a spirit, and your spirit talks to you through your vibes. So always trust your vibes. And that was our marching orders. That was our mantra. She said, we will be taken care of if we trust our vibes, but if we listen to our fears, we have no, she said, I can make no guarantees. If you trust your vibes, and you know, my life has been very magical, as have the lives of my siblings, and has the lives of my students. It is a universal truth.
Well, one of the things that you talk about in the book is that we all have 33, is it?
33 spirit guides.
Would you like to share a bit about that with us?
Well, people wonder what that's like. You know, spirit guides are those, one person said, was that puppets in the sky telling us what to do? And not at all. First of all, think about the word guide. A guide is a source of support and encouragement. And it's like if you have a coach on the court in a basketball team, he's going to give you tips and suggestions, but he's not going to come out there and take the ball for you.
True.
Now, as spirit, why wouldn't we be connected to the spirit world? Now, guides for me were very easy to assimilate because I was raised Catholic. And in the Catholic world, we were told that we had angels and saints, and we prayed to the dearly departed. And in my home, we even actually left a chair at the table and set the table every day for whoever might be passing through.